Welcome everybody. My name is Dean Rees and I'm the Mayor at the rural city of Wangaratta, and I'd like to welcome you all to tonight's council meeting. Firstly, I will start by that this public meeting is being recorded to improve access to the community for our community. The recording will be published and will be retained by council in accordance with council's legal obligations. If you submitted a question, your name and question will be recorded if you have asked for it. If you haven't asked for your name to be recorded, and your question will be read out without your name. We'll be constantly live streaming, so if it breaks, we will break ourselves until we get the live streaming restarted. I wish to begin by acknowledging the Bangarang as the original inhabitants on whose country we are gathered, pay our respects to their elders past, present and future, and extend respect to any other First Nation people watching us tonight. Could we please stand for the opening prayer? Almighty God, we humbly ask Thee to bless and guide this council in its deliberations so that we may truly preserve the welfare of the people whom we serve. Amen. I'd like to acknowledge one of our new staff members here tonight, to Yu Yin. Thank you for being here, Yu Yin, and being a part of our meeting. And of course, welcome again to Ben, handling our audio, and to Jess and Rebecca, our assistant that way. Thank you very much. I'd also like to have an absentee make note that Alan Clark from Infrastructure Services will not be with us tonight, and taking his place is Marcus Goonan as our manager for that department while Alan is on leave. I will go down to the confirmation of the previous minutes of council. Can I please have a mover for the confirmation of the previous minutes? Moved by Ken Clark and seconded by Councillor Benton. If there's no questions or queries on that, we'll put...
It was just a date that wasn't in the minutes at page 271.
Yep.
If that can be added.
Amended, thank you. We'll make sure of that, Jess, to be nominated in those minutes. So all those in favour of the previous minutes? Those in favour, the motion is carried. Thank you. Conflicts of interest disclosure. If there are any conflicts, please state your conflict. So I'll start on this one, that I have a conflict of 16.3 on the agenda tonight, as I have a relationship with the applicant's father-in-law. So I will step out of the room while that motion or while that recommendation is being put forward to council, and we'll come back at the end. Thank you. Reception of petitions, there are none, and hearing of deputations. I'll now move to presentation of reports, and we will start with councillor reports, and I'll start with Councillor Fitzpatrick, please.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So the past 3 and a bit years have gone so quickly, and what a journey it has been. It was unfortunate circumstances that led me to represent you today with the passing of Councillor Aylwin. But firstly, I want to thank the community for trusting me to be your representative and giving me the opportunity to be your voice. I also want to really thank my colleagues, Dean, Dave, Mark, Ken, Harvey, Harry, and their families for the support you have given me as a young councillor, and it has been a pleasure working alongside with you all. I am very proud to say what we have achieved for our community together, and so I wanted to share a few items that I'm proud of. I'm proud that we have addressed the importance of community wellbeing, something that was high on my agenda, and a topic I'm quite passionate about. So one of my proudest achievements whilst being on council has been being a part of receiving the $2.7 million from the federal government with stakeholders in our community, with $1.2 million of that for our Grit and Resilience program for our Wangaratta community to better understand what drives people's positive mental health and wellbeing. So seeing this in action makes me quite proud of what we can achieve together when we work together as a team for our community. I'm proud during our term we have included our youth, our next generation, in community conversations, supporting them and advocating for bike jumps and building a pump track, which I've been down this evening and it is awesome. being present at our local schools and giving them a voice. I think it's extremely important when we give our younger people in our generation to participate in community conversations. Delivering and implementing the projects for our young families with the Mitchell Avenue Reserve, the Warina Street Master Plan, it's great to see these projects becoming a reality for our community to enjoy. I'm proud we have made Wangaratta a bit more inviting and modern with the small projects that we see with the new black street lights, the fairy lights in Murphy and Reed Street. I'm proud to be a part of the endorsement of the Access and Inclusion Plan that aims to provide an accessible and inclusive environment which supports people for all abilities to participate fully in our community. However, it is difficult to summarise our time on council and all the amazing things we have implemented over the years. But I also want to say thank you to Brendan, our corporate management team, Sarah, Stephen, Jamie, Alan, and thank you to our senior management team, officers, and all of our council staff. Your hard work is so appreciated, and I thank you for your service delivering for our community and support. A special shout out and thank you to Beck and the EAs for always supporting us. We couldn't do our job without you. And our community, your support has been so much appreciated, and I have thoroughly enjoyed my time on council representing you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fitzpatrick. Just before we go on to further council reports, I just want to go back to conflict of interest, and which is item number 8. Brendan, did you have a conflict with one item? Please state your conflict.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Item 15.3, the procurement of those services are through Procurement Australia, which I'm on the board of, so I need to declare an indirect interest in that matter.
Thank you, Brendan. You don't need to step out for that, but because you're not voting, so thank you for making that interest known. I'll now go back to councillor reports, and I'll move on to Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor and councillors, some 4 years ago, after a period of turmoil and uncertainty and astronomical costs for redundancies and legal fees, the voters of Wangaratta democratically elected 7 people to put the rural city back on track. I was honoured to be chosen by my peers to lead the city for its first 2 years before passing the baton to you, Mr Mayor. The loss of Ruth Amery early in the term was a shock for us all, but after a recount we obtained another lady to fill her shoes, thank goodness. I believe the previous 4 years had really tarnished the image of the council, not only in the community, but with the state government too. We were reminded very early in our term that community consultation was more than important. The fiasco of the proposed redevelopment of Maloney's Arcade and the vitriol that was levelled at both officers and councillors over the lack of community input taught us a very valuable lesson, something that was taken on board in almost everything until COVID. Development services were certainly hindering our growth. It was common knowledge around my acquaintances that we didn't welcome new business, so people went elsewhere. I think the prime example of this was certainly the concrete plant which went to Benalla. But gradually, with a united council, things started to happen. We did get our foot in the door of government and started to see some investment come our way. My great disappointment was that our applications to the federal government for funding of our aquatic centre had never been indexed. 4.4 million was all we received, and the cost of it had blown out to some $15 million. The total cost is almost 18 million, of which ratepayers have had to fund more than 12. Expenditure on infrastructure was rolling along at around 16 million, but for the past 2 years, we've managed almost 40 million. The extension to Cruise Street, the upgrade of King George Gardens and Oven Street, the soon-to-be completed railway precinct, Bar 2 Oval reconstruction, and not forgetting the organic plant, which have all happened under our watch. Mr Mayor, there are still some real challenges ahead. We will have some state-of-the-art facilities at Wysack, but we are desperate to upgrade and expand our basketball courts, which has served us well for 45 years. Our netball centre is non-compliant. Many of the buildings at the showgrounds are dilapidated, and we now have a master plan for Warina Park, which I think will need well over 10 million to activate. Mitchell Avenue is almost complete, so we can channel some money toward our other sporting facilities. I think our IT strategy will allow us to become a real leader in local government. And once COVID is gone, our marketing will have people crying out to visit. I know that housing is at a premium, with sales continuing on an upward trend, which augurs well for the city. Mr Mayor, it would be remiss of me if I didn't thank the staff for their efforts over the last 4 years. I have fired from the hip sometimes, but believe that I have acted in the best interest of the community at all times, as after all, the buck stops with us. Certainly a couple of new faces in the CMT team have been for the better. Finally, I would like to pay homage to all my fellow councillors for the support and confidence you have shown towards the rural city. To bring together a team that has always come to a consensus on issues by frank and honest discussion has made it a pleasure to work with you all. I hope that most, if not all of us, are able to continue the journey as we strive to make the rural city of Wangaratta Victoria's best regional city. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Fuller.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to start by thanking my colleagues on council. We've had a wonderful time these last 4 years. Thank you to Brendan, CMT and all the staff, but most of all, thank you to the community. These last 4 years have been a wonderful undertaking, and whilst all journeys have a myriad of emotions, I plan to take away the positives and focus on them. The positivity of change as a community you have embraced, the positivity of growth which will come from opening up more residential spaces, the positivity of greater spread of inclusion across the municipality with more spending and projects in our important rural communities. Though I'm equally mindful of the learnings, and I truly appreciate the support of all those who have offered feedback along the way. Highlight of my 4 years, without a doubt, would be the wonderful people that I've met in the community. I'm very proud of this community. I'm very proud of those who give so much and usually with little fanfare. And most of all, I'm proud of the staff in this organisation who give so much to this community in keeping it better. Other highlights include major projects like the Organics and the Mitchell Avenue Master Plan. Organics will help with income in an environmentally beneficial way. While having grown up in Urunga, I'm more than excited to see the Mitchell Avenue Master Plan come to fruition. Thank you all.
Thank you, Councillor Fuller. Councillor Curry.
I don't want to take up much of everyone's time, but I would like to take a minute to thank a few people that I've spent time with over the past 4 years. Firstly, to my councillor colleagues, it has been incredibly enjoyable and satisfying to spend time with the like-minded people who genuinely want to do the best for the rural city of Wangaratta community. We have had some great debates, and while we have not always seen eye to eye, we have always been a group of councillors that are passionate and not scared to stand up for what we believe in for the community. To both Ken and Dean, following on from a time under administrators and with a community that needed strong and credible leadership, I cannot think of a pair that could have done it better. I thank you for always lending an ear and your support when it needed it. To the staff of the rural city of Wangaratta, past and present, you are the key to all things council. When there has been a crisis, you are at the front line supporting the community. When projects have to be done, you deliver them. I don't believe that you get enough of the accolades, and as councillors, we cannot do a great job without you. Nothing gets delivered without your hard work and commitment, so thank you. To CMT, thank you for being patient and spending the time to educate us all. I know that at times I've pushed the boundaries of our working relations, but I can assure you that I have respect for each and every one of you. I would also like to single out Jamie, especially for your support in the first few years of my tenure. You were able to give me a great insight to thinking of different ways about measuring outcomes, and that's not always about money. To the CEO, Brendan, I never knew how hard it could be to manage so many different personalities until recently. For those who have never been in your position, it is impossible to understand how hard your role can be. You do an incredible job in keeping everyone level and keeping us on point. This is a huge strength that I only wish that I had your skills. You have developed a great team around you, and I look forward to seeing where you lead Wangaratta to next. When I started my campaign for councillor, I wanted to achieve a couple of things. I wanted to ensure that there were KPIs in place, and I wanted to help create more jobs in the rural city of Wangaratta. I believe that I achieved both of these with stronger measurements in capital expenditure, stronger CEO KPIs, and general reporting. The marketing plan has taken some time to develop and get underway, but if the new councillors continue with the plan, then I am sure that the rural city of Wangaratta will continue to achieve growth and prosperity. There have been so many success stories to tell the community, but my biggest regret is not having the main street of Glenrowan beautified. The key works behind the scenes have been completed, but the works on the ground will not happen until the next budget if the new councillors deem it to be a worthwhile project. I will continue to lobby for this in the years to come. I am excited to see this come to life. I want to thank all ratepayers for the support over the past 4 years. It has been a privilege to represent the community. Unfortunately, work commitments and a young family restrains the time I have available, and you all deserve someone that has the time. I will not be standing for re-election due to this reason. At a point in time in the future, I would love to have the opportunity to again represent the rural city of Wangaratta residents as an elected official. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Curry. Councillor Bussell.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you for this opportunity. Firstly, I want to thank my community for working with me for the last 4 years. It's been an absolute privilege, and not one of the people I've worked with or anybody I've interacted with in the last 4 years has been rude to me, and that's been quite a pleasure. I want to thank my fellow councillors and staff for working with me also. It's been really, really pleasurable and quite productive. I just want to list some of the things that have occurred in the Southern Ward over the last 4 years, because apart from COVID-19, I think that we've put a lot of infrastructure and things in place in our rural community which will help us in the future. And so these are just a few of the ones that rolled off the top of my head that I've listed here. In Warrowley, there's been some new playground equipment, full upgrade of the Warrowley South Carbour Road, a pocket path in Warrowley, which people get pleasure with, works on the Carbour-Everton Road, a new netball court in Millwall, which is clearly the best netball court in the northeast. And the council staff that worked on it need to be congratulated because it was done really, really well. Streetscape plans in Millwall, sealing of some roads in Millwall, Oxley sealing of some streets, and the car park at the Oxley School, which was about $60,000. The street work in Mooryu was about $750,000 with curb and channelling, and it sets up the gateway of the King Valley for when the tourists come back. Some electrical work at the Mooryu Hall, work at the Mooryu Netball, and a grant for the fence at the Mooryu Football Ground. We're also working on the rural living zone across the rural city of Wangaratta, and I hope that in coming time that comes to fruition, because it's very important, I think, for people to live rurally now more than ever. More money for gravel resheeting. It's now $1.8 million, which is miles more than it was not so many years ago. And the roads in the rural areas have never been better. They have never been better than what they are right now. And having lived and driven on bloody gravel roads all my life, I can tell you, I really do appreciate driving around to visit my constituents on the gravel roads now. So thank you to Alan and Marcus for their team for that work. Grants for the Edi Upper Tennis Club, Whitefield Cemetery, both got grants for works there. The Whitfield Rec Reserve, new floor in the Swinburne Pavilion. Works being done in the planning for the streets in Whitfield. Surveying for the Whitfield Myery Road. A grant for the Cheshunt Hall. The roadside weeds, the roadsides and what plants that grow on our roads are very, very important. I take a great deal of interest in that. And the weeds on the roadside of the whole municipality has never been managed better than what it is right now. I want to thank Brendan and his team, and I'm not sure whose team it is there that looks after the weeds. It is sensational now. They really, really care, the contractors, for looking after those weeds. And for all the tourism grants that have been issued over the last 4 years, and it is regrettable with the COVID that our great tourist industry has come to a bit of a halt at the moment. But I have great faith that it's going to kick off as our summertime starts, and the numbers are certainly trending in the right direction. So I want to thank all my constituents, everybody I've worked with over the last 4 years, and I'm looking forward to the next 4 years working with everybody too. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bussell. Ladies and gentlemen, I was elected to council in 2016 and have been the mayor for the last 2 years. When we started on this journey as council 4 years ago, we made it very clear that we wanted to make economic development and growth in Wangaratta a priority. I'm proud to say that we've been able to achieve this, though we've had some challenges along the way, and I still think there is a lot of work to go, and we'll get there. I'd like to acknowledge firstly the contribution of Councillor Ruth Amery in her short time on council before tragically passing away. Her loss affected us all, and it's a credit to all councillors that Councillor Amery's legacy was respected while we welcome Councillor Fitzpatrick to the team. The biggest shift over the past 4 years has been a massive increase to our capital works funding. Key projects, as mentioned before by other councillors, Cruise Street extension, the Wangaratta Railway Precinct enhancement, the Wangaratta Cottage project, and transforming Wangaratta from a tired city with ageing infrastructure to a modern city ready to take the next step. Our regional areas have not been forgotten either, with record investment in gravel road reshedding, as pointed out by Councillor Bussell, and our township plans and rural placemaking funding. We've overseen record capital works investment over the past 2 years, and that will set us up for years to come. We will complete the vibrant city that we're seeing today. Another area I'm particularly proud of that has been the transformation of our planning process to make it easier for people to do business with us. We want Wangaratta to grow, and we are making sure that this can happen in a sustainable way. We've opened up in the last 12 months massive residential growth areas both north and south. We've developed areas of our CBD where we attracted business like Quest Apartments, Dan Murphy's, and more to come. The past 2 years have been extremely challenging, with freak storm events followed by bushfires and now COVID. Throughout, this focus has been on supporting our community in any way possible. Sometimes this meant lobbying governments to allow us to reopen, and other times it has just simply meant providing shelter during a fire. I know that there is much work still to be done in this space, and we will continue to grow through this COVID-19 and transition to an economic and social recovery. I am also proud to stand and support the Bangarang name and its people. In my time as mayor, I've had 2 deputies, Councillor Curry and Councillor Fuller, and I'm proud to have them by my side. And I thank them for their support, their opinions, even though I don't always agree with them, but it always matters. I'd like to thank Councillors Benton and Bussell. Thanks for your respect, your knowledge of the years, as well as your ability and openness and your transition to change, and also for the tireless work that you've both done in your country communities. It's been noticed. Councillor Fitzpatrick, our only female councillor, and mum to all of us, a very valued member of our team, and thanks for teaching me about our youth and allowing me to be involved in your portfolio to gain this understanding. Councillor Clark. I should be saying, my mother always told me that if you've got nothing good to say, you'll say nothing, and I could wrap it up right now. But I've taken kindly the counsel of the years, and you've been quietly surrendering the things of the youth. I've spoken to you on regular on regular occasions to former mayors Dinning, Joyce, and Grant, and spent four years with you as my guide from 2016, my council colleague certainly my sparring partner, and I hate to even say it now, as my friend. I love your opinionated ways. I put that in brackets as sometimes, but you have a worthwhile role on council, and you are greatly appreciated as my council constituent, and I hope you get back on council. You've got a lot more to offer. I'd like to point out to Directors Clark, Chubb and Brindley. We've had some good and bad and some indifferent moments, but the best way to appreciate someone is to imagine our term here without you. So thanks for all your great work. Stephen Swart, well, he's showing me a balanced way that planning matters and how it might adversely affect a person's rights and interests, and hopefully learning to have an open mind to the matters, free from bias. But be open to persuasion. I hope you're open to persuasion as well, Stephen, to make our planning process a bit simpler and a bit easier, and to help the people of Wangaratta. It's all about learning, and we're both learning this together. So thank you, Stephen, for making a huge change in this area, and Wangaratta would not be the open-minded planning area that we now have without you being here. Brendan, it's all about the results, so tick. Steve Jobs commented that things in business are never done by one person. It's done by a team of people. But any which way you look at it, you need a really good leader backed by a great team to really score goals. Thanks for your leadership, patience, and also your connectedness to all councils. Massaging 7 different personalities is a job on its own. There is a lot to look forward to for the future, and for all the Wangaratta people, I say thank you on behalf of me. You've been a part of my life for 4 years, and some people like me and some people don't, but I'd like to represent you again and be here at the table. Your input, though, in our community consultation and everything, the phone calls I get, is invaluable. So stay safe and make sure you're here for the coming years. And to the 3 girls up the back, and especially the 2 girls, Jess, and especially to Rebecca, who's been my sounding board for a long, long time. We text each other at nights about certain issues and things that I need doing, and I always get a text back fairly promptly. So thank you very much, and thanks to everyone. I'll now hand to Brendan McGrath.
Thank you, Mayor Rees, and to all of the other councillors for your great words. Just very briefly, this evening is about the Mayor and councils. It's not about me and the staff team, but if I could, just very briefly on mine and CMT's behalf, just congratulate you all for a very successful 4-year term. I think it's been a highly successful term from my perspective, so congratulations to all of you for the part you've all played in that. Thank you, if I could, on behalf of our community, for the care that you have shown for their well-being. And thank you for the respect and support that you've shown to me and to the staff who work here. That's highly appreciated, and in local government can be a bit rare. And finally, for those of you who are running again, good luck. And to Mark, who's declared tonight that he's not, thanks for your time, and I'm sure our paths will continue to cross going forward. So congratulations and thank you to you all.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, could I move that all those reports be included in the minutes?
Absolutely. We have a mover. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Fuller. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Thank you, Councillor Clark. Well, thank you, everybody. We'll get down to some our general business here. So we'll go into officers' reports, and we'll go to 13.1, and Sarah from Corporate Services. 13.1, Sarah, our ICT strategy and core business systems contract.
Thank you, Mayor Rees. I'm not quite sure how to follow all of that, but I'll do my best. With 13.1 ICT strategy tender for our core business systems contract. So this report is presented to Council to provide details of the evaluation of the core business systems tender process. As part of Council's ICT strategy, the core business platform project aims to introduce a single cloud-based software as a service platform. And that will support a large proportion of the services delivered by Council. Benefits of this system will include, firstly, improved customer service by providing our community with even more digital self-service solutions, making it quicker and easier to access Council services. Secondly, improved workforce productivity, joining up processes and breaking down silos across the organisation, facilitating increased automation and better visibility and management of our end-to-end service levels and delivery. A more mobile workforce, enabling staff to complete daily tasks more efficiently whilst out in the community, delivering face-to-face services out on the front line. And last but not least, improved security and disaster recovery by having our records and data stored and backed up in the cloud. The recommendation follows a thorough procurement process and seeks authorisation for the CEO to sign documents to award the contract for this tender. And because it's still a matter of commercial sensitivity, the full details are included for councillors in a confidential attachment. So the recommendation is as on the screen. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. We have no questions in relation to the ICT strategy 13.1. So can I have someone to move this strategy? Councillor Clark, and seconded by Councillor Curry. Would any councillor like to talk on this? Councillor Clark? No? Curry?
One of the things that we've spoken about greatly over the last 4 years is IT, so this is a long time coming. The work that's been put into this is probably second to none, thank you for all the work that has been done into this. But this will really see, in your words, Dean, into the future with the IT strategy, and it's really good that it's been done. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's no other councillors to talk, I'll put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? The recommendation is carried. Thank you, Sarah. 13.2, the updated instrument of delegation by council to members of council staff.
Thank you. So this report's presented to council to update the instrument of delegation to members of council staff. This is an annual activity and ensures that all these powers are updated and reflect the latest changes to legislation and regulation. We also included this year some further improvements that will help some of the council officers work in a more streamlined and efficient way. I won't read through the full details, but the recommendation is there on the screen.
Thank you. And again, there's no public question time on this issue. Can I have a mover to move that? Councillor Fuller, and a seconder, Councillor Clark. Would any councillor like to talk? No. I'll put the recommendation to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Thank you, Sarah. 13.3, 2019-2020 carryovers of capital and operating projects.
Thank you. So this is another annual report, and this report seeks councillor authorisation to carry over funds from last financial year into this financial year for project costs and any associated grant funding for projects that are still ongoing. It also seeks authorisation to reduce the 2021 budget by the stated amounts for funds that have already been spent last year due to a number of projects that were delivered ahead of schedule. And again, the full figures and recommendation is on the screen. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Again, no questions from the gallery in relation to this. Can I have a mover forward on this one? Councillor Curry, and a seconder, please. Councillor Clark. Any councillor like to talk on this recommendation? No. I'll put the recommendation to a vote. All those in favour? And the recommendation is carried. Thank you, Sarah. I'll now move on to item 14 and 14.1 in the community wellbeing. Thank you, Jamie. The sale of the facility and land at 8 Sadler Street, formerly known as Max Parkinson's Lodge.
Thank you. So this report is presented to Council tonight following a period of community notice around the sale of the land and the facility that has been known as Max Parkinson Lodge, which is in Sadler Street in Wangaratta. This has been on the table for Council's consideration for a number of years, and it's around progressing with an option to develop social housing within Wangaratta, which we know is very important. Following a previous expression of interest process, Council has been working with Beyond Housing to develop the project, and this is the final step in the process. So the recommendation before Council tonight is that Council considers the submission that was received regarding the sale of land following the notice period, and that Council proceeds with the sale of the land for the land and facility at 8 Sadler Street, Wangaratta.
Thank you, Jamie. Again, no questions from the gallery on this. I'll look for a mover. Councillor Fitzpatrick, thank you. And a seconder, Councillor Fuller. Would Councillor Fitzpatrick, you'd like to talk on this, please?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. So this will be a fantastic outcome for the land formerly Max Parkinson Lodge beyond housing and our wider community. In our community, homelessness and youth homelessness is an increasing issue, something that I'm very familiar with in my daytime job, supporting vulnerable youth who face these issues almost every day. I'm proud to be a part of a community that advocates for our most in need, with new social housing units to be built to provide a safe, secure and affordable housing, which is a human right, a service that will truly benefit our community. I will absolutely be supporting this decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Clark.
Mr. Mayor, I would just like to make a comment that I'd like Max Parkinson's name to be incorporated in some way in that development. Pardon me. He was certainly the mover of the starting of Meals on Wheels in Wangaratta and worked tirelessly for the community in an honorary capacity for some 40 years. And I think it would be remiss of us if we let the Max Parkinson Lodge go without some recognition for him.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. I might hand that back to Jamie because we did talk on something. Thank you, Jamie.
Yeah, thank you. And absolutely agree, Councillor Clark. It has been a priority with us right from the start that we found a way to acknowledge Max Parkinson. His contribution to our community has been incredible, and the legacy that he has left we would like to see remembered. We have been working with Max's family to recognise that, and they have been updated of the project as every step has developed. Beyond Housing has committed to recognising Max in some way. At the moment they're thinking that the common square or the garden in the middle would actually be keeping his name, so be called Max Parkinson Square or something along those lines, but they will continue to consider how they could recognise Max. We agree it's a really important part of the project.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Ken. Good question. Councillor Fuller.
Yes, I'd just like to take a moment to acknowledge Councillor Curry. He's championed for this process for the entirety of the time that I think we've been here, and it's a tribute to himself, to the fact that he has always put community first in the conversation, and he's always challenged, especially Jamie's department as community wellbeing, challenged them to look outside of the box, and I think he should be acknowledged in the work that's been put forward here because it's been his championing that's helped this process. So thank you, Councillor Curry.
Thank you, Councillor Fuller. Did you want to close off, Councillor Fitzpatrick, or you? Nope. Okay, I'll put the recommendation to a vote. All those in favour? The recommendation is carried. Thank you. Jamie, the 14.2, the informal bike jump assessment and proposed mitigation.
Yep, thank you. So this report is presented tonight to Council for consideration around an issue that has arisen within our community and a project that we are proposing as a mitigation tactic to move forward. So many people in our community would know that there has been a constant evolution of bike jumps throughout the city and some of our rural communities over the last couple of years. Council has been working in some way with young people to try and mitigate the impact that these jumps are having and to minimise risk that they pose to both the people using these tracks and also the surrounding neighbours and community members. We have got to the point where we have been working around a more sustainable way to move forward with this. There are literally jumps in most of the open space areas of Wangaratta in some form. And it has reached the point where a structured way moving forward is required. We have gone through looking at a number of different options and have assessed those against a number of different risk elements for us to consider. And the recommendation before Council tonight is developed with the aim of trying to reach a way forward that balances the needs and the priorities of young people and their preference to have access to areas within our community where they can be independent, where they can socialise and where they can have some level of control around how the jumps look and feel and how they can interact there, and balancing that with the concerns of our community residents around environmental impacts and environmental damage, and the safety and amenity of our neighbourhoods. So it really has been a conscious effort to balance those two different priorities. We have listened to many of the community members who have raised concerns or who have highlighted to us that they feel strongly that the jumps have a place within our community, and the recommendation is a balance of controlling the sites as much as possible and limiting their impact and supporting young people to have this place and have this activity. So the recommendation before Council is in several parts. It focuses on confirming sites as designated supported jump sites within Wangaratta, and there's 4 of those that have been proposed. The second part is around removing existing or emerging jumps if they are within inappropriate areas or they're causing damage to the environment or to public use. Installing signage across 3 different types of sites, so those sites that will be supported sites, those where we have removed jumps and areas that are high risk of jump construction, and also working with jump builders, so the local young people who are out there enthusiastically building the jumps, actually getting someone in to help support the process to ensure that they're safe and engaging for the people who are using them. And the last part of the recommendation focuses on monitoring the success of this approach on an ongoing basis and adjusting it consistently as required.
Thank you, Jamie. Now, there are some questions from the gallery. Did you want to start reading and answering those questions, please, Jamie?
Yes, so there's a number of questions and I'll go through each of them. So the first question is around the rules of the behaviour at the bike jump sites were established at a meeting in July 2019. These rules have not been followed, resulting in significant damage to areas along our creeks and rivers. Which council staff were tasked with monitoring and enforcing these rules, and will they be deployed during the weekend and throughout the school holidays? This question is right. In July 2019, we actually held a meeting where we had almost 200 people, predominantly young people, but some of their parents come along, and we discussed the rules that would be required for us to be able to support the development and use of these jumps that were evolving. These rules in some areas haven't been followed as strictly as we would have hoped. What we would say is that it's really disappointing that the behaviour of a small number of young people is actually impacting the perception of the jumps right across the city. We've seen as much wonderful behaviour and really caring behaviour as we have some of the negative antisocial behaviour that is happening. So we are equally disappointed that that is happening. But we acknowledge that some of the behaviour has caused damage, it has been disruptive, and it has impacted the perception of the jumps. We are installing signage at each of the proposed supported jump sites and will work directly with young people using the jumps in partnership with schools and the police, and of course more broadly with the community to address this behaviour in a proactive way. Council will focus on ensuring that the jumps are safe and that the impact on the environment is minimised, and that the expansion of jumps in unauthorised areas is controlled. This will be monitored during the week and responded to appropriately. It's really important for us to acknowledge that antisocial behaviour at the sites is a challenge and one that is very hard for Council to have an impact on. It's important that the behaviour at any facility or location within the community that is illegal or antisocial is reported to the appropriate authorities, including the police. The second question is, in the Council's Wangaratta Parklands Master Plan, there is an area already designated for bike jumps at Northern Beaches. Why are 4 new sites being promoted when there is no mention of the Parklands site already allocated in a very accessible area where no damage will be done to the environment? So again, this question is correct. We do have an area allocated within the Parklands Master Plan for a future bike jump site, and we are continuing to work at that. What I would say is that this site is very early stages in terms of development, and the site has got a number of challenges. So there has been rubbish dumped and a significant amount of rubbish dumped at the site in the past, and we're talking, for many years and many years ago. It's quite extensive cleanup that would be required for us to go in and redevelop that area for the jump sites. The other thing with this particular project site is that what we are proposing here, and what came out through engagement with young people and users of the Parklands area, is that this would be a more structured and formalised project. So we're talking about something that's very similar to the pump track that's just been finished in Mitchell Avenue. This obviously requires more detailed design and to go through a budget allocation process for Council. So it would actually be formally designed and constructed by council. It wouldn't be constructed by local young people who are building these in an ad hoc manner. So it's a slightly different project than what we're talking about with the bike jumps that are emerging in other areas. We had another question around that within the Chronicle article, which was on September 4th, which discussed the 4 proposed bike jump areas. The Mayor was stated as saying that some sites may require temporary fencing while being rehabilitated. Can the executive in charge of the environmental services detail the damage that has already taken place at the numerous bike jump sites and what measures are being planned to rehabilitate the damaged areas? So some areas that the jumps have been constructed have had significant damage to the environment. Outside of the 4 nominated areas, Council has set some criteria, which is in the recommendation, that will determine when the jumps will be removed. One of these criteria points is environmental damage. Once these jumps have been removed, there will be a rehabilitation focus to support their recovery for these areas. For some of these areas, we may need to temporarily fence it off to support regrowth. Council's environmental team will work to establish the needs of each individual site, as it's important to understand that each site has been impacted differently. Planting of trees, removal of or redistribution of dirt, and repatriation of the creek beds and waterways will all form part of the rehabilitation work. For some areas, this will mean that signage outlining the prohibition of bike jumps construction will also be installed. Another question is around, before Council votes tonight to support the bike jump areas next to our creeks and rivers, I asked this question: how will the support align with your responsibility to be stewards of the Wangaratta environment? On page 39 of the Environmental Sustainability Strategy, this responsibility is described. Both to councillors and council employees are required to be stewards of natural reserves, encouraging sustainable use and enjoyment by the community, educating the community about stewardship of the environment. In response to this, we absolutely agree that that's a role for council officers and council laws to play, and that has in fact formed part of the thinking behind this recommendation. So the recommendation is based on trying to find a balance between the activity of bike jumps and protecting the environment. We recognise that young people are committed to developing these bike jumps, and our role is trying to control it and limit the impact on the environment as much as possible. So this is why our approach around supported sites looks at areas where we can have that control over the impact on the environment, and other bike jumps that evolve will be removed. Another question here around, why are you putting jumps in a space where we used to play so that even more gangs of punk kids that can mess around, swear and throw rubbish? So again, as we've acknowledged, some of the bike jumps have grown in places where young people themselves have decided they should be. We understand that not everyone who are using these jumps are behaving well, though we also know that there's lots of young riders who are wonderful and appreciate that they can have access to jumps like this in their own community. It's a challenge, and it's really disappointing when some young people are ruining it for everybody, but we hope that this approach that's recommended tonight, with some support from parents, local police and a commitment from the young people themselves, that the behaviour will improve. Second question there is, it's really annoying how all these gangs of kids keep coming and wrecking the environment. I mean, seriously, who lets their kids use a flipping hatchet to whack against trees? My question is, why do you let people wreck the environment like this? What I would say is that as council laws and council officers, we totally agree that the environment should be protected, and damaging trees in any way is unacceptable. It's disappointing to hear that anyone would be deliberately damaging trees and causing vandalism to our environment. We believe that a focus on protecting the environment is important in moving forward with this project, but it will take a commitment from everybody to achieve. The next question, why is Council ignoring several principles contained in its own Wangaratta Parklands Master Plan, i.e. the creation of high quality public open space and the principle of enhancing the landscape character by dumping large amounts of soil randomly is not enhancing the landscape? How is the dumping of soil and the construction of them by kids a safe practice? So in response to this, the bike jumps creation have been driven by young people themselves, and to this point, Council's had no involvement around the sites or the construction of the jumps. We certainly value the focus on the creation of public open space and landscapes, and this has formed part of our recommendation. In that being that the soil will not actually be dumped randomly, that we've gone through a process of looking at what sites we can access and where dirt can be placed so that it doesn't cause damage to the environment. The placement of dirt and the use of the dirt will be supported by council and will be informed by an expert who will help work with young people to develop safe and engaging jumps, but only in supported sites where their impact can be managed. The challenge is that not all activities and facilities actually enhance a landscape. So this approach is about trying to find a balance. The next question, what is your plan to control the unacceptable behaviour and enforce the rules in these areas, as council has not been able to control it so far? Part of this behaviour has been damage to the local environment, littering, bullying towards younger children, as well as members of the public. What staff within the rural city of Wangaratta will be tasked with enforcing these rules? Will staff be performing their supervisory role on Saturdays and Sundays? And will there be extra staff hours allocated to this during school holidays? So managing and monitoring these rules has absolutely been a challenge for council officers. Unfortunately, the behaviour of a few has impacted the perception of all people who are using the jump sites. We have many council officers right across our organisation who have been working with young people, residents and parents to try and improve these challenges. Council officers will undertake regular inspections to ensure that damage isn't occurring, that new jumps are not dangerous and that material hasn't been brought into the jump sites. And importantly, that the areas more broadly haven't been vandalised. It's important to acknowledge that when it comes to the antisocial behaviour, that council is not in a position to respond to illegal or serious antisocial behaviour. It's important that the right authorities, like the police, are contacted to respond. We do have our youth services team who are brilliant and have been out there working really hard with young people. And young people themselves have become advocates for these spaces and trying to encourage positive behaviour. But we would reach out to everyone in the community to try and hold young people accountable and make sure that this behaviour is being monitored and reported appropriately to the authorities. The next question, there is a draft community engagement plan out for public comment. On page 2, it states that community engagement is about involving people in the decisions that impact their lives. In the spirit of this, do you intend to consult the broader population of Wangaratta regarding the positioning of the 4 improvised bike jump areas, especially the people who have homes along the riparian zones of Wangaratta? So council has not engaged directly with the residents yet regarding these sites. However, significant feedback has been received, which has all been considered. Council officers will communicate with residents following the decision tonight on the sites to ensure that appropriate standards and considerations are met. The next question, up until Friday the 18th of September, which was a few days ago, the Rural City Wangaratta website dedicated to the bike jumps issue displayed incorrect information regarding the proposed bike jump area at Urunga. The proposed nature reserve on Valdoris Avenue until 3 days ago was not indicated on the aerial map. How are residents supposed to contribute meaningful feedback regarding the jump sites proposed if we were not provided with accurate information in a timely fashion on the council website? In response to this, I would say that we've tried really hard to give accurate and up-to-date information right across this project. This, however, is a project that is rapidly evolving and changes being made very quickly. The particular site that's being referred to here was actually only added a few days ago, just before the council report and agenda was pulled together, and it was based on some feedback that we received actually from our environmental team and from young people who were using the area. That's why it was added into the list, and a slight change had been made from another area that was in the Urunga neighbourhood. So my apologies that the community didn't have access to that information well in advance of the decision being considered tonight at council, but it actually was a last change, and we updated the website as soon as possible. Next question, what has the consultation process regarding dirt bike jumps between Council's Environmental Department and the Community and Recreation Department? So we've actually worked really closely right across the organisation. Sometimes there are projects that touch on most units of council, and this absolutely is one of those. We have set up a project control group meeting, and we actually meet weekly. And that project control group has representatives right across the organisation, including officers from Community and Recreation and Community Wellbeing, so my directorate, the environmental team, infrastructure, planning, and including in their youth services as well. There's been a significant work across the departments to ensure the response and recommendation reflects all of the appropriate considerations. So right from our environmental protection to engaging young people to planning considerations and to the actual construction and management of these jumps and how we are going to monitor and maintain them has all been considered in this recommendation. The next question, why do these groups of boys need 4 improvised bike jump sites? This is excessive considering there has been a permanent purpose-built bike jump site installed at Mitchell Avenue, which has cost ratepayers $400,000. It is a success. Wangaratta also has skate parks and other recreational spaces which the rural city of Wangaratta pays to maintain. The restrictions on young people playing sport due to COVID-19 have also been lifted. So in terms of the number and size of the bike jump sites and their use at the moment, we would all say that the limitations, the social restrictions that have been placed on young people and the fact that there is no school and no organised sports has led to them being more popular and construction being more widespread. However, the bike jumps have evolved organically, so council hasn't until this point had any input into where the sites have been allocated and located. And for anyone who's walking around, you'll see that they're really widely spread out throughout the city, and I actually would have no idea how many there actually are at the moment. So bringing it right down to only 4 sites in itself is a massive change to how the bike jumps are constructed at the moment and how they will evolve within our community. The number of young people who are using the jumps is significant. It has actually evolved into being one of the largest activities for young people in the Wangaratta area at the moment. And the jumps themselves, so these 4 proposed sites, will actually come at a minimal cost to council. So for us, it's around bringing in dirt and some installation of signage, and for us as officers working with young people to try and improve the behaviour and limit the impact on the environment. The next question, why do we need dirt bike jump sites hidden along riparian areas where we are so lucky to have these right through the city? Why allow a small group of boys to negatively impact and monopolise such an environmental treasure? Council agrees that protecting the environment is important and should be a factor in deciding the appropriate locations for jumps. Indeed, it will be part of the criteria that will be used to determine if jumps are removed. The number of young people using these jump sites is significant and it's spread right throughout the city. One of the challenges for us has been when we've spoken to young people that it is in fact their desire to be outside and to be amongst the natural environment that has actually created the appeal of this project and the construction of the jumps for young people. So where we're at is that it's actually an enormous amount of young people and the broader population all wanting to use the natural environment and enjoy our community and be outside. It's around trying to find a balance between how that use is actually mitigated and people can be in harmony in having the multiple different types of uses. The next question is around support for the recommendation for the Wangaratta area and in particular familiar with the Valdoris Avenue area because they regularly walk along 1 Mile Creek walking trail. I've become increasingly concerned over the past few years to see more and more unregulated digging and changing of the banks along both sides of the creek, mainly because of the environmental impact of soil on tree roots and river banks, making it impossible for the healthy growth of trees and native shrubs and riverside growth, and of course the destruction thereby of necessary food and habitats for local birds and animals. I walk along the lovely creeks and riverbanks of our town for the joy of experiencing the wildlife and flora, so it concerns me to see this is threatened by unregulated and unsupervised digging. I live near the new pump track on the Urunga pool site and have been so pleased to see its completion and much use by local children who have much need for a well-constructed and thought-out play area for some time. I assume the Valdoris Avenue digging sites can be filled in now and would expect this from council as a land manager for this area. There is also an issue of ownership over sites, particularly at Valdoris Avenue, because I've spoken to other young people on the walking track and have heard anecdotally of a particular group of young people who have commandeered this area and are causing local smaller children to feel intimidated, so they no longer feel safe playing. Also, homeowners' property and privacy is not respected. I do hope the new council pump track at Urunga will not be under such group influence and would expect your regular surveillance of this to prevent this happening. So first of all, thank you very much for your feedback regarding Mitchell Avenue. The pump track has been a huge success and we've seen large numbers of young people using it. In terms of the ownership challenge, this is something that we have been made aware of, not just at Valdoris Avenue, but a number of the different sites. Again, we are working with young people to try and address this, and it does appear to be a very small number of people who have taken over some perception of ownership of these sites. We will be working closely with the schools and going directly to the sites to try and minimise this antisocial behaviour, but it is absolutely something that we are working through. It's important that since these jumps are on public land, that everyone feels like they can access the space and be safe and comfortable. So the last question is around a document that has been produced by Shepparton Council. So a number of councils right across the state, and I imagine more broadly, have actually been dealing with this challenge of bike jump construction by young people. It is a really popular sport and it's growing. It has great appeal, and for local government areas that have large numbers of open space, it is an appeal that has resulted in bike jump constructions right across cities. Shepparton Council has produced a document that has responded to their removal of bike jumps, and it has been asked whether councillors have seen this document. So councillors were not presented with the Shepparton document. In fact, I wasn't aware of it myself until I saw it from this community member. But we did, in fact, consider the response that was being taken by a number of different councils throughout Victoria and how they have handled bike jumps within the municipality. Most councils have found it a particularly challenging thing to address. For some councils where bike jumps have been removed, they have been built as quickly again, and in fact been built much bigger and caused much more significant damage. Other councils have gone through a more formalised process, which is part of our response around building things like the pump track. So there's lots of councils who are grappling at the moment with how to respond to this, including Shepparton. That's it for the formal questions.
Thanks, Jamie. Councillor Fuller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Jamie. I'd like to make 2 amendments to the recommendations on the screen. Firstly, under dot point 1, when we confirm the following sites, I'd like to see that we delay the designation of the Valdoris Avenue subject to the success of the pump track and review of the area. Secondly, under dot point 5, I would like to see the criteria for monitoring be added as some of the items to potentially be the environment, safety, observation of the rules, and resident satisfaction when monitoring these. Thank you.
So that's the new recommendation moving forward. Can I have a mover? Councillor Fitzpatrick on that. Sorry, Councillor Fuller is the mover. Seconder is Councillor Fitzpatrick. Would any councillor like to talk on the recommendation?
I'd just like to, Mr. Mayor, firstly, it's fantastic to see that the pump track is actually already crowded. We've been down there on a number of occasions. There are families there. There are a number of age groups there, all being utilised in different tracks for the different levels of safety and stuff. It's great to see them active, and I'm very happy to see them out there actually doing something in nature in that sense. And I implore parents to be present at the jumps when all things are designated and signed and such, to see how wonderful the creativity is and the activity that these kids are doing. The majority are great. They're working to the rules and they're doing a fantastic job at being outdoor and active.
Thank you, Councillor Fuller. Councillor Fitzpatrick.
I just want to echo Councillor Fuller. We were actually there today around 5:30 and it was buzzing, which was absolutely fantastic. I want to thank our young people for advocating for something that they believe in and are passionate about. It's great to see you guys outdoors. I also really want to thank our staff, Jamie and team, Marcus Schoonen, for their involvement with our young people. It's been fantastic, and I think it's really great when we come together and deliver a project like this. And I think that's the longest public question time I've ever sat through, so thank you, Jamie.
Thank you. Councillor Curry.
One of the key things that I heard over and over through all that was antisocial behaviour. And Mr. Mayor, I ask you to throw your mind back to the pinball arcade down the road here and what could be considered antisocial behaviour. And one thing I can say, it's turned through the edge of time. It just keeps rolling over. But I don't see it as a council issue. I actually see it as a community and parenting issue that probably needs to be addressed. So, you know, if we're thinking about holding some of these things back because of that, I think it's unfair. What we're talking about here is getting kids outside into the community, which every parent wants to see their kids grow and experience. And, you know, instead of sitting home playing these TV games, that there's evidence now that reports that it rewires the brain in a different way, and it's just not social. Where something like this actually gets kids out, it gets them thinking, it actually gets them just to imagine it, it gets them exercise. You know, it's just a fantastic thing, and we should be raving about how good this opportunity is. And you know, the kids that are out there that are actually having a go and doing it, and there's a mere few that are causing issues. Well, you know, we need to stop and address that as opposed to that. Point 5 that we're asking to change, monitor the success of this approach on an ongoing basis and adjust as required. I don't think we should be asking the council to necessarily monitor the bad things about it. Yes, monitor the good things and about how it's acting for the community, but you know, if things are going wrong, then that's up to the police and being lawful. You know, if things are doing things wrong, it's not necessarily the council's job to do all of that. So I think we need to be really careful about what we're asking the council to do and not to do. But again, I think this is really good for the community, and you know, it's a great opportunity for kids just to get outside and be, I guess, live their life and do something that's not available in any other function.
Thank you, Councillor Curry. Councillor Bustle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am the only councillor here that has teenage children. I can say, since COVID came in, the pressure that children have been under, I see it firsthand, and my children live on a farm, they have plenty of space. Now, I've heard a lot about the environment tonight. I get the environment's important. I get that. It's very important. But we haven't heard too much about the well-being of the children. And this, getting outside, as Councillor Curry said, it's an opportunity. We don't need to demonise these kids at all. We need to really encourage these kids to get out. But just remember, and for the people that have teenage children, how extremely hard it's been, and still is. They're just tearing their hair out. The kids are just tearing their hair out at the moment. And I think we need to be very mindful how we tread here. Environment's important, but the children's our future too. That's our asset as well. One's no more important than the other. So I think that needs to be given consideration how hard it is at the moment for these children. No sport, no school, too much screen, going to school on screen. I can understand why they've got shovels out there digging holes in the ground. I can understand it. I would have done the same. So I just think that needs to be taken into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Before I throw back to Dave, if he wants to end off, can I just ask a question through to Director Chubb? Hypothetical situation, if council went and destroyed all the bike tracks, all the bike jumps that the kids have made, how long would it take to get them back?
So we've actually found ourselves in that situation before where we did remove them. It took them about 48 hours.
Yep. So you're saying by controlling the situations with certain signage, certain areas, etc., allows a more professional approach to this situation.
That's our belief, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Fuller, would you like to finish? So we'll put the recommendation to changes that Councillor Fuller as the mover and Councillor Fitzpatrick was the seconder. We'll put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? The recommendation is carried. Thank you, Jamie.
Thanks.
Okay, we're going to move on to Marcus Goonan to 15.1. I'd just like to say, Marcus, thank you. Welcome along again, and thank you for the great work that you've done over the 4 years. I know you're a sounding board for most of us, our councillors, when if Alan Clark's away or not available, you're always there for us. So thank you for your hard work too. Thank you, and I'll let you continue with 15.1, Adventure Playground Park or Space Apex Park.
Thank you, Mayor. This report's presented to Council to recommend the appointment of a preferred contractor for the design and construction of the Adventure Playground and Parkour space at Apex Park in Wangaratta. The project will develop and activate one of Wangaratta's most prominent areas, Apex Park, with a significant adventure and play destination. Located within the CBD and on the banks of the Ovens River, the precinct will drive visitation, build social connection and achieve economic growth and diversity. Parkour is a emerging, incredibly popular activity, and the parkour elements will be activated by the Council's Youth Services team. The existing playground will also be transformed into an adventure-style playground suitable for people of all abilities and ages. The project will also include some minor works on the existing shelter, seating, connection of paths and landscaping. The recommendation is on the screen, but in general it authorises officers to continue to negotiate a final price with preferred tenderers and authorises the CEO to award a tender at a later stage up to a maximum sum of $1.5 million.
Thank you, Marcus. There's no questions from the gallery, so can I have a mover for that, please? Councillor Fitzpatrick, seconded Councillor Curry. Would any councillor like to talk? Councillor Busser, you've got your microphone on? No? Sorry, I'll go back to Councillor Fitzpatrick as the mover.
Yeah, this is another exciting project that I'm seeing. This has been a really youth night, so I'm kind of in my glory this evening. It's great to see we're doing lots of things for our young people and our young families, so fantastic stuff, Wayne Council. Thank you.
Good. Thanks, Ashley. Councillor Bustle.
I wasn't going to speak, Mr Mayor, but as soon as you invited me to speak, and Councillor Fitzpatrick said it's all about the youth tonight, well, I feel quite youthful going into a council election to win the next 4 years. So this playground on Apex Park is a great place, and it's a lot of money. I acknowledge that for the people, and my constituents will say we're spending a lot of money, but the youth here in Wangaratta is still our future. And if we can have a park like that, where there clearly is much more control than on the riverbanks, I think it's a great thing. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
So I got out of that, councillor, that you're re-nominating. Is that correct? Oh, sorry.
Mr Mayor, if I could nominate twice, I would.
Thank you, Councillor Bustle. Councillor Fuller.
Yes, I think this project gives a nod to the fact that at the moment our biggest demographic is around our elderly citizens, and it would be fantastic to see projects like this come to fruition so that we can encourage more families to move here and to live here and to bring up their kids in this wonderful place.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Curry.
I don't think I've ever talked so much at a meeting.
No.
One thing that I guess I'm a father now of a 4-year-old, and one thing that I've noticed is we've been taking Ethan prior to COVID to places like Wodonga and Albury and Shepparton to parks, and it was the one thing that was really missing in Wangaratta. This one will be sort of scoped for all ages and so forth, but I think it'll be a really good asset and hopefully bring people to Wangaratta like what we've done travelling to other towns, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Curry. I'd also like to say thank you to Council bringing this forward and fellow councillors supporting to getting it to this stage, and I look forward to the vote in the positive to continue this project. Councillor Fitzpatrick, would you like to finish off, or you're okay? I'll put the recommendation to a vote. All those in favour? The vote is carried. Was that favour or against? Councillor Clark against. Would you like that noted, Councillor Clark? Yes, please. Thank you, Marcus. The 15.2, Cusack Spearing Street drainage and car park renewal.
Yep. This report is presented to Council to award the contract for the Cusack and Spearing Street drainage and car park renewal works. This is the second stage of the works that were started last financial year to upgrade areas of Cusack and Spearing Street, which regularly flood and create hazards for vehicles and pedestrians. And these works will essentially be the final stage of removing those flooding issues. The recommendation on the screen to award the contract to Jarvis Delaney Contractors, authorise the Chief Executive Officer to sign and seal documents and disclose the final contract price.
Thank you. No questions from the gallery again, so can I have a mover for this, please? And I'll get Councillor Clark and a seconder. Councillor Bussell. Oh, sorry, Councillor Benton, I haven't missed you there. You've been very quiet, but I've got Councillor Bussell there. Would anybody like to talk on this recommendation? No? I'll put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? The recommendation is carried. And the contract price, please, Marcus Goonan.
The contract price is $842,910.16.
Thank you, Marcus. Item 15.3, Brendan, could you just repeat your conflict, please, there?
Thank you, Mayor. I am a director on the board of Procurement Australia, who are the procurement group for this tender, so I'm declaring an indirect interest.
Thank you. Thank you, Marcus.
This report is presented to Council to award the annual reseal program for 2021. As part of our asset management program, Council completes an annual reseal program based on road condition data, and the reseal program consists of preparation of bitumen seal along selected roads in both the urban and rural areas. Recommendation on the screen to note the preferred tenderer as BituPave, authorise officers to negotiate a final price with preferred tenderer, and Chief Executive Officer to award the tender at a later stage.
Thank you, Marcus. There's no questions from the gallery for this. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Clark, and a second to Councillor Benton. Are there any councillors like to talk on the recommendation? Say no. Oh, Councillor Bussell, thank you.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. As a rural councillor, roads are the lifeblood of our community, and it's very, very important that we maintain our sealed roads as well as the gravel ones. This is about the sealed roads, and to see the staff monitoring the roads continually in the thousands of kilometres that I drive around the rural area is great, and this is good to see this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bussell. No other further responses. I'll put the recommendation to a vote. All those in favour? And the recommendation is carried. 15.4, the Carbor Everton Road Emergency Egress.
This report is presented to Council to consider approving the implementation of emergency egress works on Carbor Everton Road. At the March 2020 Council meeting, Council instructed officers to work with representatives of DELP, CFA and Municipal Fire Management Planning Committee and other agencies to create a safe public egress during emergencies such as fires along Carbor Everton Road. This plan was then to be presented to a council meeting prior to the current fire season. At this point, council officers have completed the plan, costs required, and have sought all necessary approvals for exemptions from DELP. The recommendation on the screen to approve the construction of a turnaround point at Carbor Everton Road, approve the tree reduction works on Carbor Everton Road, subject to receiving approval from DELP, approve the expenditure of $140,000 on the works, fund these works from the existing gravel road resheeting project, and if funds are available, refund this amount at the mid-year budget review.
Thank you, Marcus. There's no questions from the gallery. Councillor Benton.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move the recommendations, but with the addition in dot point 4, after the word budget, list this action in the budget action list as a priority for the review. I'll move that.
Okay, thank you. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Clark. Would you like to talk on this, Councillor Benton?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. The reason for that addition is to make sure that it isn't missed in the review and the monies can be hopefully found and put back into, because this council may not be all in its entirety at the mid-review. I'd like to point out 3 comments, Mr Mayor. In the previous motion and in front of you there in the report, you have a thing embedded in the previous motion called to implement the fire management plan. I think it might have been taken from the start that this was just going to be a plan. We also on March 19th of March, the Municipal Fire Management Plan Committee passed a motion or a recommendation to Council to carry out the works that are now being proposed. I also will say that I foreshadow that I think council should give serious consideration in the further budgets that we have a fuel reduction or hazard reduction line in the budget. Because I can recall at the start of this that we wanted to put some money in because we didn't know how much it was going to be cost. We were going to find the money somewhere. Because I didn't want to get to a point where we were going to start arguing over funds for it, because it had to be get done in line with those guidelines of the CFA, and 12 have the same guidelines. I'd just like to point those facts out that I think going forward we're going to have to be a little bit mindful about emergency hazards. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Benton. Councillor Clark, did you want to talk? No? Microphone on. Councillor Bustle, no doubt you do want to talk again.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Given that I moved the notice of motion in March. This started about 15 years ago when the Cardboard community identified potential risks to the community there. Now, the Cardboard CFA is a very proactive CFA across all sorts of things, from rectifying, opening up the road when the storms were there in 2015, and the same again in 2018. When council couldn't get there, the community did it themselves. Then it comes along to the bushfires of 2020, which has given a lot more weight to this, when the whole Cardboard almost got burnt out, and I was at the front line for day after day. So I think that this pilot project is good planning because it is identifying hazards and treating the problems. And I wholeheartedly support Councillor Benton that in the future we need to be having a budget line on managing our roadsides better for emergencies. Now, at the top of Cardboard is the rural city's biggest pine plantation. Now, there's thousands of tonnes of that product comes out along this road in the summertime and the wintertime to the timber mill at North Wangaratta. It's a very large employer in this forest. But along with the pine forest comes some hazards. And one of those hazards is the large amount of trucks going up and down, day and night, 24 hours a day. At the moment, B-doubles, if there was an emergency, they can't turn around. They just can't turn around. They've got to go to the end and turn and come back again. And school buses in the storms, they were ducking and weaving, both the school buses, trying to find a safe haven when the storms were on. And so the turnaround point, although one's a good start, but there needs to be about 3 of them. And I think this project is very, very important. And I must thank the staff. I want to thank Alan and his staff for the work that they have done on this project, because I've been involved with them too. Been out on site on numerous occasions there, and the support and the expertise of those staff has been bloody phenomenal. It really has. It really has. And we've got to a point where the emergency part and the fire part is really taken seriously. It's really taken seriously now. So I urge everybody to support this project. And for the people that's in the council, and hopefully I'm one of them in the next term, that's something we've got to look at all the way along, is managing the hazards on our roadside. It's very, very important. Very important. And this is another place where the environment's very, very important, but so too are the people that use these roads. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bustle. I'd just like to point out to everybody, this is how important having ward councillors are and having portfolios for councillors. Councillor Benton's portfolio is emergency management, so very strong part of his portfolio. This isn't his ward, so should he care? Yes, because that's his portfolio. This is Councillor Bustle's ward. Very passionate about his ward, always has been and will always continue to be. So thank you guys for doing the job that you are supposed to do. Bustle for looking after your ward, and Councillor Benton for living up to what your portfolio instructs you should be doing. So thank you. Great work done, and by Alan's department. Councillor Benton, would you like to finish? Oh, sorry, Councillor Curry, talking again.
I'd just like to say that this project here is really worthwhile doing and so forth. My greatest concern is that we're looking at taking the money from the resheeting. We spoke about that we were trying to get the resheeting up from 50, currently from memory, the resheets, one road would be done every 50 years before we came in here, and it's heading towards once in every 20 years. We're talking about a community, and we can certainly say the country is the backbone of Australia. I'm pretty sure the city people won't say that, but we're all going to get fed from somewhere. And unfortunately, there is big distance to travel, and there's a lot of roads out there. So there's no denying that. And I am concerned that we're looking at taking out something out of 140,000 out of that's something that means so much to the rural community and getting these roads right. We talk about borrowing $10 million for the pool. We're spending $5 million for the railway precinct upgrade. We're spending millions within the rural city, within the city of Wangaratta, and I just find it really hard to understand why we'd be looking at taking the 140,000 from the resheet when Harry has been talking about how good the roads are to be doing it, and it's because we're investing the money in the roads. So even though that we make it a priority, it shouldn't have been there to begin with, I don't believe. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Benton, did you want to finish as the mover?
I'd just like to say that I have sentiments with Councillor Curry's comments just then, but I'm afraid I'm at the stage where if we keep trying to find time to get the works done, we won't get them done. And I think it's committed, and that reinforces why we need a line item in our budget in relation to hazards going forward. And hopefully some of us will be there to make sure this review will be, and priority will be number one, enforcing and making sure that money goes back into the resheeting program. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Benton. In that case, I'll put the recommendation to a vote. All those in favour? The recommendation is carried. Thank you, Councillor Benton. Development Services, Stephen Swart. 16.1 is the Wangaratta Economic Development and Tourism Advisory Committee and Agricultural and Agribusiness Advisory Committee appointments for the 2020.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This item is about the membership of those two advisory committees that you just mentioned. Each year, the term of service of 3 members of each of the advisory committees expires, and an expression of interest process is followed to fill those vacancies. This year, we received 4 applications for the Economic Development and Tourism Advisory Committee and 1 application for the Agriculture and Agribusiness Advisory Committee. The applications have been assessed against the skills matrix, which aims to ensure adequate representation across a number of sectors and to fill any skills gaps identified for each committee. The recommendation is to appoint 3 people to the Wangaratta Economic Development and Tourism Advisory Committee and 1 person to the Agriculture and Agribusiness Advisory Committee.
Thank you, Stephen. There's no questions from the gallery on this one, so can I have a mover, please? Councillor Fuller, and a seconder, Councillor Curry.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move the first part of this recommendation with the addition of the names Stephen Oxley, Trent Crovers and Dennis O'Neill to the Wangaratta Economic Development and Tourism Advisory Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Benton.
The nominations that Agricultural and Agribusiness Committee is Graham Norman, the appointee.
Thank you. Would any councillor like to talk on the recommendation? Councillor Bustle, no doubt.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I spent a bit of time in these committees, and I just want to thank these people for volunteering, because they spend hours there. They put a lot of thought into what they say at these meetings, and I think it's a credit to all those volunteers that come and do that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Fuller. I'll continue somewhere else. Councillor Benton, did you have something to say?
I'm okay.
Okay. If there's no one else, I'll hand back to Councillor Fuller as the mover.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think equally as attributed to the people that are sitting on these committees at the moment is the work behind the scenes. We've pretty much from day one spoke about the need to invest in economic development. Councillor Curry and Councillor Bussell sit on these on this particular committee, and they are led by a great team of people: Celeste Brockwell, Janine Rolls, Travis Vincent, Kate Clark, and what we see is actual movement in this group, and it's one of the most productive groups, and they should all be applauded, all the current sitting members as well as the new members that are coming back onto it and such for this, because it's very important that we continue to progress our economic development in this community.
Thank you, Councillor Fuller. I'll put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Thank you, Stephen. 16.3, which is the planning permit application for a two-lot subdivision of all variation. Sorry, I'm not. 16.2 is the planning permit application for 449 McMahon's Road, Springhurst, to a two-lot re-subdivision.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This item is about a planning permit application to re-subdivide existing lots at 449 McMahon Road, Springhurst, to create a small lot around an existing dwelling in the farming zone. Public notice of the application was given and one objection was received. The officer's assessment of the application is included as an attachment to the agenda and includes consideration of the relevant provisions of the Wangaratta planning scheme and the content of the objection received. This assessment has concluded that the application is inconsistent with both state planning provisions and Council's local planning policy. The officer's recommendation is to refuse the application.
Thank you, Stephen. Councillor Bussell.
Mr. Mayor, I'll put through an alternate motion, and I'll just read my alternate motion out. That Council issues a notice of decision to grant a permit with respect to planning permit application PINAP 20/131 to a two-lot subdivision, re-subdivision, at 449 McMahon's Road, Springhurst, subject to the conditions listed below in accordance with the endorsed plans. Excluding condition 1, point 3, I'll just read out some main points here. A section 173 agreement here. A, lot 2 must not be used or developed for the purpose of a dwelling or other accommodation. B, the subject land must not be further subdivided in any way that creates an allotment, an additional lot, and the owners and occupiers of lot 1 acknowledge that noises, smells, sights and sounds typical of agriculture are to be expected in this area. Now this, Mr. Mayor, is almost identical to one we did in Meadow Creek, and there's no more houses being built in the area. It just readjusts a boundary title. And
just before you go, Councillor Bussell, before you continue on, I think that's great that you continue. We need a seconder to get the motion on the table.
Okay, thank you.
So can we have a seconder? Councillor Benton is seconding. So thank you, Councillor Benton. Councillor Bussell, did you want to continue?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As an agricultural person and a farmer, I think that this is good for farming, and I will never support anything like this if it's not good for farming. And as a farmer, I can tell the difference of what's good for farming, and this is freeing up a farm to farm and having a house as a house. And having spoke to these people, I think they will be very good farmers with this. So I urge everybody to support this because it's good for farming. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bussell. Councillor Benton, did you want to talk on this? Sorry, you're on mute. Still on mute, Councillor?
I'll electrocute myself here soon.
Can hear you now.
been supporting the words that Councillor Buzzell said in relationship to these excisions, and I know that I've said in the past that this has been a situation that has arisen over the years in relation to excisions of the densities of housing, especially in the farming sector. This situation and configuration of homes has been like this for, I would say, the last 60 to 70 years. And now we've made sure that the density ratio is not going to get any greater in that area. We must also realise that in the agriculture area we're going to have some ability to have workforces. And at this particular time in this emergency, we're really starting to see in agriculture why we need some people to be able to probably live within the agricultural sector, because we just can't get workers across the border, although it's just starting to relax. It's been extremely difficult, especially in the horticultural industry. So I think it's all very well to say you need agricultural land to support a dwelling. You also need people to support the agriculture. So I'm just putting those points out that it's somewhere along the planning we're going to have to address some of these issues, and possibly at the state level, I know, but I'm just putting that in front of the council at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Benton. Councillor Fuller.
I think the last time we had a similar situation, I made this point, and I continue to make this point that echoes what Councillor Benton and Buzzell have said. And we need to, in the future, work towards advocating to have these changes put in place, because the precedent is growing, and we need to be able to support our rural farmers in this conversation so that we can ensure that there isn't so many hurdles for them to achieve this goal.
Thank you, Councillor Fuller. Councillor Curry.
I'm just going to reiterate what I have been saying over the last year. We have rules. We follow the rules. We shouldn't be playing judge and jury over what the rules are. If we want to change what the rules are, then we should be advocating. And we've been talking about this for a year, and I have not seen any advocating to change these rules. So I don't think it's fair that we should be playing judge and jury.
Thank you, Councillor Curry. I think that's our job, to play judge and jury. That's what we're here for. So in the preliminary objectives of the planning in Victoria, I'll point out 1.01 says, and dot point number 7, to balance the present and future interests of all Victorians. Point 1.02, the purpose of the planning scheme. Dot point number 2, to express state, regional and local community expectations for the areas and the land uses. And this is what we're doing here tonight in support of Councillor Buzzell's as the mover of this alternate motion, and Councillor Benton's seconding of this alternate motion. So I urge all councillors to go with the alternate recommendation. Thank you. Nobody else? I'll turn back to Councillor Buzzell to finish the debate.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. And I can assure you we are following the rules, as if we weren't, we would be told so by our senior planner. So this is a great project. Let's get on with the job. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. I'll put the recommendation to a vote. All those in favour? The recommendation is carried. Yes, Councillor Clark against. Did you want yours recorded, Councillor Curry? Yes, thank you, Councillor Curry. Thank you, Stephen. We are going to move on to 16.3, of which I will step out of the room and hand the reins over to Councillor Fuller, as I have a conflict of interest, as I have a relationship with the father-in-law of the applicant, and we'll step out. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Councillor Fuller. This item is about a planning permit application to vary a restrictive covenant that applies to land at number 6 Pin Oak Drive, Wangaratta, and then subdivide this land into 2 individual lots. The restrictive covenant effectively prohibits any future development of the proposed vacant lot by limiting development on the entire subject land to 1 single dwelling house. A previous application for the variation of the restrictive covenant and two lot subdivision of this land was considered and refused by Council at its meeting of 20 March 2018. The current application proposes no material differences to that of the previous application. The proposal has been reassessed against the relevant parts of the Planning and Environment Act and the Wangaratta Planning Scheme, including a specific requirement in Section 60, Part 2 of the Planning and Environment Act that Council must not grant a permit to remove or vary a restriction unless it's satisfied that the owners of land benefited by the restriction will be unlikely to suffer financial loss, or loss of amenity, or loss arising from the change of the character of the neighbourhood, or any other material detriment as a consequence of the removal of the restriction. Formal notice of the current application was given to all beneficiaries of the restrictive covenant, and 9 objections to this proposal were received. The officer's recommendation is to refuse to grant the permit as the application is inconsistent with the Wangaratta Planning Scheme, and it cannot be sufficiently demonstrated that the owners of land benefited by the restriction will be unlikely to suffer loss arising from a change to the character of the neighbourhood or other material detriment as a consequence of the covenant variation.
Thank you, Stephen. We have no questions from the public, so I'll look to have somebody to move that, please. Okay, and somebody to second that, thanks. Thank you, Councillor Buzzell and Councillor Curry.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, I think it's important we have something to say on this one, and looking at what Director Swart has said about the whole estate there, and the people that bought there knowing what it actually was, I think that it would be unwise, in all fairness to all people there, to grant the permit. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Buzzell. Anyone else wish to speak to it? In that case, I'll put the motion. The motion. Yep. So I'll put that motion to vote. We have 3 that's carried. Councillor Benton, Buzzell and Curry. So it's 3 out of 5. Correction. Those against? I didn't raise my hand for 4 because I was the casting vote, so I am raising my hand to refuse the permit. Would you like your votes recorded, Councillor Clark and Fitzpatrick? No? Okay. I'll get somebody to grab Mayor Rees to return. All yours, Mr. Rees.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Dave. We will continue on to 19, and I'll hand 19.1, Record of Assembly of Councillors. I'll hand over to Brendan McGrath.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is an administrative item. As we have each meeting, we have a series of assemblies of councillors and advisory committee report, in this case primarily through August, and they are there for council's noting.
Thank you. There's no questions from the gallery on this. Are there any... Sorry, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Curry to move, Councillor Clark to second. Is there no conversation around this issue? No. I'll put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? The recommendation is carried. There is no notice of motions, no urgent business, and there is no public question time. There's no questions from the public, and no confidential business. So, ladies and gentlemen, we draw to a close tonight's meeting. So on behalf of the rural city of Wangaratta, I'd like to say thank you for supporting our council over the last 4 years. And again, thank you to the great staff that do work tirelessly for the rural city, even during the COVID time. And again, a special thanks to Jess, who comes in here on our council meeting nights and that. And thank you to our new staff member, Yu Yen. Thank you. And always to Rebecca, who's always there for all of us councillors. Thank you. And thanks again, Ben, at the rear. To all CMT, thank you again. And my fellow councillors, great working with you, and look forward to seeing you at our last council